bring you Killer Wise, episode 32. Getting away with murder. These are the case facts against Danielle Redlick, who claimed she killed her husband in self-defense. Isn't trust a bitch? Winter Park, Florida, a suburb of Orlando, Florida, made famous by Disney World, Universal Studios, but also made famous by the murder of one Mr. Michael Redlick. But what prompted the murder of Michael? Was it truly in self-defense, as Danielle stated? To find out, we must go back. Back to the day of the murder. Back to the conditions surrounding self-defense. Oftentimes, prophetic words are fulfilled in a murder case where there is animosity between a couple. These particular prophetic words would envelop the characters in that now famous murder case that occurred around 10 p.m. on the night of January 11th, 2019. The words, "I will be all right as long as I can keep the knives locked up from her." These words become the epitaph for Mr. Redlick mere hours after he spoke them to his closest friend. This particular cold-hearted, gruesome killing would occur on a partly cloudy, 58-degree night and would thrust the residents of 1231 Temple Drive in Winter Park, Florida, into the national spotlight. As an age-old argument between couples concerning adultery began, it elevated into a physical altercation that would end with the stabbing death of Mr. Redlick. His wife, Miss Redlick, would go on stabbing and stabbing her husband repeatedly until he breathed his last. Whether Miss Redlick intentionally meant to kill her husband of 17 years or not, she was successful at stabbing him in an anatomous portion of his body called the basic vein. The basic vein runs from the palm of the hands upwards towards the inside of the arm on the side of the long bone that extends from your elbow to your pinky finger. The basic vein is considered superficial because it's near the surface of your skin, but it would have taken only 5 to 6 minutes for him to bleed out after she callously plunged that knife into the soft tissue of his face and his body. It's highly unlikely, if Miss Redlick had been a man, that she would have gotten close enough with a weapon to inflict harm against her husband. But this is a danger in trust from a relationship that has spanned over 2 decades. You're watching M&N, the Men's Channel. But it is what Miss Redlick did next that would damn her credibility during her initial police interview and certainly at her murder trial that would follow her conviction. You see, after Miss Self-Defense purposely stabbed Michael and left him to die on the kitchen floor, she went to her bathroom where she took the time to shower and clean herself up. She wanted to be clean. For a woman who would claim to be afraid for her life in the presence of her husband would find that forensics would show otherwise. After completing her regenerative shower to wash off any evidence of purposeful killing, Danielle took a moment out to check her phone messages. Why was that important? Now, if she was truly injuring her husband in self-defense, wouldn't you think that she would run out the door? Run out the door now that he was out of the picture permanently? Or perhaps it would make better sense to call the police for assistance from a neighbor's house that lived less than 50 feet away on her lakefront property. Now, not for Danielle. She would erase messages that she received from a man she had planned on having an affair with while her husband was still yet alive. Other messages she would erase would come from a man she was looking forward to a relationship with on a dating app known as meetmindful.com. Now, when Danielle had taken care of all of her personal business, she turned her attention back to her dead husband's body. Now, I believe it was her initial intention to rearrange the scene to appear like a robbery gone bad, but she gave up midway through the whole ruse. To this end, Danielle prepared a very large bucket of bleach water mixed with the commercial cleaning chemical known as fabuloso, and she began to alter the murder scene. She would go back and forth between the upper hallway closet where there were additional towels to soak up the blood, as her husband had bled out extensively after she cut a vein that led to his heart. Now, Danielle would initially move her husband's body to a chair in the living room before she finally returned him back to the floor near the kitchen. Now, in statutory law, this is known as tampering with evidence, or, as you might know, evidence tampering, which is an act in which a person alters, conceals, falsifies, or destroys evidence with the intent to interfere with a police investigation. Now, it is believed that Danielle slept a few hours before she then looked up on her computer how to commit suicide and how long it takes for you to die after you cut yourself. Now, I believe Danielle initiated these searches purposely to sway a jury long before she could ever go to trial. You see, Danielle was a smart woman who knew that police conducted computer and phone forensics after any such murder. Now, with Danielle's hectic schedule post-assassination of her husband, 10 hours had elapsed between her running around preparing the crime scene, her alibi, as well as her defense for her subsequent trial before she thought to dial 911. Now, a couple hours before police were involved, she would use 2 different knives from the kitchen to superficially cut both of her wrists on the inside in an east to westerly direction. Now, these surface abrasions were not enough to injure or kill Danielle, but they did make her bleed until they clotted. You see, Danielle was not interested in dying the way she killed her husband. Danielle was merely preparing a backup defense of insanity in case the self-defense ploy blew up in her face. Now, when she was finally ready, she called a neighbor to come over where she informed him about what had occurred from her point of view. This is the moment she called 911. Now, let's take a moment now and listen to the initial 911 call, where you will hear her male neighbor talking to the dispatcher, followed by him hanging up because of confusion. Next, you will hear her redial 911 dispatcher with her version concerning what happened that night. Now, we have transported and transposed both calls against the background of actual interior of the $1 million Florida villa that Mr. Redlick had built purposely for Danielle. We have added a few actual crime scene images interspersed between the images of the current home. Let's take a listen.
911, do you need police, fire, medical?
Yes. We need a car here at 1231 Temple Drive, Winter Park, Florida. There's a woman that's a danger to herself and to others right now.
The gentleman that's a danger to our...
Pardon me? Pardon me?
The address.
1231 Temple Drive, Winter Park, Florida.
Okay, stay on the line. I'm going to have to transfer us over to Winter Park. Let me talk first when they answer, okay?
You better go in your room. Where you dance?
911, do you need police, fire, or medical? This is Seminole to transfer for police at 1231 Temple Drive.
Yeah, please. Go in your room. Will you stop? No, all right. I will call you back. I'll call you back in 5 minutes. I'll call you back in 5 minutes.
What is going on there? Hello? Winter Park, this is... Yeah, I'm still there. He didn't give me a lot of information. He just said that there was a woman who was a danger to herself. Okay. And yeah, that's all. And he called on a 911 only phone, so... Okay. And I just want to confirm he told you 1231 Temple Drive? Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Seminole. No problem. Bye-bye. All right. Bye-bye. Can we call your medical? I don't know. I think my husband's deceased. This is a tragedy at my home. What's the address of that? 1231 Temple Drive, Winter Park. Yes. Okay, you know what part jurisdiction? Let me get their fire department on the line. Hold on one moment. Winter Park number 1, you need police, fire, or medical. This is someone with a medical transfer for 1231 Temple Drive in Winter Park. Alright, 1231 Temple Drive, right? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Alright. Okay, thank you. What's going on at 1231 Temple Drive? I believe my husband is deceased. Okay. And why do you believe he's deceased? Because he's been, he's stiff and he's been wondering he might have had a heart attack. I don't know. Okay. Did you just find him? No, actually, it happened last night. It happened last night? Correct. Okay. How old is your husband? He's 65. So did you find him this morning? Because I know you said that you believed it happened last night. Did you see him last night? Was he okay or was... He was not okay last night. We had altercation and he stabbed himself and I ran into the bathroom and then when I came out I tried to help him and I saw he was just lying in blood. And then I tried to help him and I stabbed himself. Correct, yes. And then I tried to help him, and I woke up sitting up next to him, and I was trying to figure out what to do. Right. I got you. I'm gonna get you some help, hon. So you all had an altercation last night, correct? Yeah. Alright. What's your name? Danielle. Are there any weapons on scene now? A knife. A knife? Mm-hmm. And you said he was 64, right? 65. I'm sorry? 65. 65. So, okay. Go ahead and give me your first name again, because I don't want to call you name. Danielle. Danielle. Okay, so Danielle, let me ask you this. So, did he stab himself last night? Did he pass last night? And you just didn't know what to do? Correct, I believe so, yes. Okay. Were you all drinking? He was. He was? Yes, he was. And altercation was the night before too, but I left the house and took my children with me because he was dancing them too. Mm-hmm. Were your kids there last night during this altercation? No, they were not. They were not here, and they're not here now. I know you first said that you thought he had a heart attack. So do you think it was a heart attack, or do you think it was due to the stabbing that he passed away? Probably the stabbing triggered it, I guess. I don't know. It's a shoulder wound. You say it's a shoulder wound? Right. I'm just getting all this information. How old are you, hon? I'm 45. everything you told me into the call, okay? I have multiple units throughout me, and I have police in my Go ahead and give me your husband's first name.
Michael.
Michael. What's his last name?
Redlick, Redlick.
Go ahead and give me his date of birth.
5153.
If you listen closely, you would have overheard Danielle initially say that she thinks her husband is deceased. Midway in the same thought, she changed that to be he had a heart attack, before going for the brass ring of he stabbed himself. Now ultimately, after the dispatcher continued to pursue Danielle, did she change her statement to them having a conflict 11 hours earlier before she chose to dial 911. Now, in all the fairness to Danielle, she did attempt to dial 911 20 minutes after she killed her husband that night, but she immediately hung up before they had a chance to even answer her. Now, Danielle knew that she needed time to craft a better defense before turning herself into the police. Danielle would craft a version of events concerning the murder so bizarre that even the police would be hard-pressed to believe her. Now, Miss Redlick would insist that after being forced to stab Michael in self-defense, she ran and hid in the master bedroom to protect herself from any more of his aggression. Now, Miss Redlick would continue to insist all the way up to her trial that it had never occurred to her that his stab could be so fatal. But if you have watched the Killer Wife series long enough, you know that typically at this point in a murder investigation, that all the evidentiary information will be coming from the wife's tale, as the husband is dead and he can no longer defend himself. So whatever the killer wife says her husband did after his death is typically negative about him and totally positive about her. I'm just warning you. Now, in these horrific cases of trying to save your butt before you end up in jail, you will always hear the husband was either abusive, mentally abusive, or sexually abusive. Now, these key words are used by high-priced lawyers to help sway the jurors in the direction of the wife who had killed her husband to either keep her out of jail or definitely away from the death penalty. Now, at Danielle's subsequent trial, she would move to character assassination of her dead husband, as many killer wives do. Danielle would paint her husband as a serial abuser. She would testify that on the night of the murder, her husband Michael was struggling and trying to strangle her. At one point, she could not breathe. She says at this point she was in fear of her life, which prompted her to reach into a kitchen drawer behind her to get a knife to defend herself. Now, Danielle claimed to have suffered physically as well as mental abuse at her husband's hands throughout the years now, and that the alleged strangling was one of the worst incidents yet. Now, she would say that the argument between them that night began after he allegedly discovered she had been cheating on him. But as the police arrived on the scene after the second 911 call, they gathered a different story of events in a home that clearly appeared to freeze in time a one-way fight that led to murder. Now, detectives and forensic reported seeing red streaks in the floor and blood splatters on the wall of the kitchen, living room, and area of the master bedroom. This was no stab in defense of one's life. This was a cold-blooded slaughter of innocents. Prosecutors said there were signs of Redlick trying to clean the scene after the officials found bloody towels, a mop bucket full of red-stained water. A bloody knife that stabbed her husband was still lying on the floor, leading to the kitchen, along with two other knives in the sink. Now, police had medical transport Danielle away from the scene after taking pictures of her physical appearance, as you see here. Now, she was sent to the local hospital where she could be checked out and treated for her superficial cuts to her inside her wrist. Now, in an Orlando hospital interview with detectives, Danielle refused to go into detail about the night her husband died, but she explained that he had gotten into an argument over a text sent to her by another man. Now, we had some issues, she told detectives, and last year he basically cheated on me, and it was a big, long, drawn-out thing. And we finally came around to living together again and possibly trying to work it through. But I think that really wasn't happening, and in my mind, she said, it was inevitable going to be probably that we're going to separate again. But the revelation that Danielle killed her husband of 17 years was not as damning as the revelation that Miss Redlick was the actual daughter of Mr. Redlick. That's right, I said this wife was his daughter. Is that shocking enough to you? Now, she was not Mr. Redlick's natural daughter by birth, mind you, but the fact that he had married her mother prior to her for 3 months before her ultimately dying of cancer 2 years later. Now, the only reason Mr. Redlick, the high-priced executive, married Daniel's mother at the time was that she had an aggressive form of cancer that needed insurance that she couldn't cover. Now, Redlick at the time thought he would be the gentleman and marry her mother to add her to his insurance for cancer coverage. When he married Daniel's mother, Danielle was 20 years older at the time and 20 years younger than Mr. Redlick. But police were not concerned as much about this new wrinkle in the case as they were about why Danielle did not call them immediately after the murder or during the fight. Now, explaining why she didn't immediately place a call for service to the police department, Redlick, who has 2 children aged 15 and 11, told authorities that she was scared and exhausted, having fallen asleep next to her husband's body after attempting to give him CPR. Now, however, at Daniel's trial, Assistant State's Attorney Sean Wiggins had previously told jurors that when Danielle returned to the kitchen later that night, she said she thought her husband was just being dramatic, as he lay there in a pool of his own blood. She claims the situation became real for her when she called out his name and he did not respond. She then tried to save him with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, she says, to no avail, which prompted her to touch his face and then place her head on his chest. There was no heartbeat, she said. Michael Redlick was dead at 65. Danielle continued to play the grieving wife role on the stand by saying, "My heart dropped at that point and I started thinking, what the heck? And I see the blood," Danielle said. "I'm glancing around at my phone and I'm just looking at him and trying to figure out, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, did he die?" Now, this is when Danielle says she went into shock and began making serious and really bad decisions. Her first mistake, Danielle testified, was not calling 911 immediately. She said she was in such a panic that she dialed 911. But when the call didn't go through, she began contemplating suicide instead of calling back. She then looked up how to kill herself by slitting her wrist and tried it, but the thought of her children stopped her.
You're watching M&N, the Men's Channel.
Danielle said, "I heard something saying not like this." Danielle, not like this, she said. "Your kids can't lose both of their parents in one night." Then she said she wept as she lay with her husband's corpse, first on the ground and then on a brown chair that she'd moved his corpse onto until she fell asleep, in her own words. Now, she was a nurse, so she would have known this guy is dead. Danielle testified that after realizing Michael was dead, she eventually checked and deleted phone messages from another man she'd been seeing, as well as messages between her and Michael. But she denied the prosecution's claim that she also spent time on a dating app, which she did. Now, after Danielle successfully called 911 on the morning of January 12th, police arrived and found Michael's body along with blood and cleaning supplies spread throughout the house. Now, attorney for the state Wiggins told jurors in his opening statement, in which he said the house resembled a scene from a horror movie. Redlick also claimed she kept slipping in her husband's blood while trying to help him, and so she began to clean the area with towels. Now, according to her arrest report, Redlick rang the emergency service at around 9:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning, 11 hours after she said the fight with her drunk, angry, and abusive husband began. She would invent a far-fetched story of events in an attempt to win the jury over in self-defense case. Now, Miss Redlick said the fight started when Mr. Redlick spat a piece of a McDonald's hamburger in her face. She then claims to have grabbed a serrated knife from her kitchen before her husband snatched a blade from her and began making stabbing motions towards himself. So he was trying to kill himself, she said. Now, court records purportedly showed Redlick had filed for divorce from Mr. Redlick in March of 2018, describing their 13-year marriage at the time as irretrievably broken. Yet a judge apparently dismissed the petition in November, indicating that Mr. Redlick had not been properly served divorce papers. Now, officers were informed by those who knew the couple that the relationship was rocky and toxic. I say again, rocky and toxic, but not murderous. Now, following her husband's death, Redlick was taken to a local hospital by paramedics as she had tried to harm herself. Her medical records revealed she had alcohol in her system, which was a different response than she told the 911 operator. At the time, Redlick was on probation from a January 2018 arrest in Seminole County for resisting an officer. She was arrested on probation violations charged on January 23rd now. So I guess this woman could never stay out of trouble. Now, prior to his death, Mr. Redlick, who was the Director of External Affairs and Partnership Relationship for the DeVos Sport Business Management Program at UCF, told a witness his wife was crazy, but as long as I can hide the steak knives, I should be good. Now, police alleged the pair had been plagued by infidelity issues for some time, with Mr. Redlick filing for divorce in 2018 after having accused her husband of cheating. Now, the couple's two children, a son and daughter aged 11 and 15, allegedly told police their parents were both alcoholics and described the marriage as toxic. Now, Danielle said that both she and her husband had been unfaithful and that they had each moved out and then back into different points in 2018. So Danielle filed for divorce, right? But the couple continued to spend time together, and Michael managed to avoid receiving the papers, including with her help on one occasion when she ignored a process server who came to the front door. Now, the county medical examiner ruled the death a homicide now, determining his stab wounds were not self-inflicted and that he suffered injuries that appeared to be defensive. He had wounds here and wounds here. Now, Michael Redlick also worked for Cleveland Cavaliers, Cleveland Browns, San Francisco 49ers, and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in Memphis. Redlick was named the Grizzlies Vice President of Corporate Sales and Sponsorship in November of 2001. Now, while the Grizzlies, Redlick boosted the team's sponsorship revenues and brokered a deal with First Tennessee Bank, awarded naming rights for the Arena Club level, which became the First Tennessee Club. Amazing. And Mr. Redlick was also when they took students to post-Hurricane Katrina New Orleans, each August now, to rebuild homes in our Hope for Stanley program. Redlick mentored students who organized a charity run to benefit Pulse Foundation, which was established after the shooting at Pulse nightclub in Orlando. Now, hundreds of people have reached out to the school since Redlick's death, sharing stories of how he encouraged them and the things he did for them. Now, Marcia Inglis, a family friend of Danielle and Michael Redlick, took the stand describing the interaction she had with the couple the night Michael died. What made Danielle's demeanor that night? And Gillis was asked. She just seemed irritated, upset. Something was on her mind, Inglis said. He seemed okay that night. Just again, he was on the sidelines doing his normal thing by coaching a game. And Gillis said, and she told jurors that she saw the couple at their son's flag football game. The Redlick son and her son played on the same team, and that night the boys had asked to have a sleepover at Inglis' house, and luckily they did because of the murder. And so that had already been approved and plans had already been made before the game had started. Now, Inglis was asked in court. Inglis told jurors she had only a brief conversation with Danielle after the game and then left the boys. She just said that it had been a strange evening. They asked her, "Did you see any injuries on Danielle that night?" Inglis was asked in court. She said no. Now, I know this might be a strange question. Did she ask you for help or anything that evening in court? Inglis was asked in court this, and she said no. Inglis told jurors everything seemed normal until Danielle sent her text messages the next morning, which was after the murder, just asking if I could keep her son Sawyer after the next morning's football game because there was a family emergency. Inglis said she kept the Redlick son at her house through Sunday until Danielle called again. She said, "Hi, this is Danielle. You've heard there's been an emergency," and she just mentioned Michael had passed away. "I think it was a heart attack," Inglis said. Police said Michael did not die because of a heart attack, but because he was stabbed multiple times with a kitchen knife. Now, the testimony of Inglis was the first account jurors had heard about what others saw the day Michael died. Danielle is arguing she killed him out of self-defense. Prosecutors are saying she was the aggressor in the case. We heard from several other witnesses this afternoon, including a bloodstain pattern expert. He had been going over photos from the scene for hours, describing to jurors how he believes different bloodstains throughout the house were made. Now, with all the mounting evidence against Ms. Redlick, one would think this to be an open and shut case. But sometimes in life, even bad people get away with murder. An Orlando, Florida jury ultimately found Danielle Redlake not guilty in the stabbing death of her stepdad turned husband, Mr. Michael Redlake. The jury began deliberations on that Thursday and Friday of the week to acquit Danielle of second-degree murder. The jury did, however, find Danielle guilty of tampering with evidence, according to Orange County records. Danielle, now 48 years of age, has been released on her own recognizance, pending a sentencing hearing on the lesser charges, which will take place on August the 5th of this year. For Killer Wives, this is Charles Rivers. We'll see you again next time.